Good day. I am NIZZA Gabrielle de la CRUZ. There are many issues in the prison management of the Philippines, some of which are involving human rights of the prisoners, their hygiene, food consumption, rehabilitating activities, gangs, and the most problematic among all these is the prison corruption. I believe that there shall have no special treatment for the prisoners, since they are sent there for breaking the law. When they indulge in prison corruption, they are able to smuggle mobile phones, drugs, weapons through the help of an employee or officer who had been bribed by them. I also believe that committing another crime like corruption will not help them with rehabilitation. All the officers in charge shall know to themselves and keep it to their hearts that no money can pay a man's dignity. Anyone who tolerates these kinds of acts are just as guilty as the offender. While I had discussed about the negative side of prison management, our penitentiary is not as dark as you think it is. In fact, the GCTA or Good Conduct Time Allowance that reduces the sentence of the prisoners was enacted to give credit to the good qualities and the changes that are being seen to the inmates inside the penitentiary. It takes two to tango. To rehabilitate, our management shall put extra effort to its program inside the penitentiary, and the inmates shall cooperate and try to avoid any actions that will make them break the law again.
Some of the trends and issues in the jail and prison management in the Philippines are overcrowding, as well as related issues such as lack of privacy, which can relate or worsen mental health problems in prisoners, and race violence, self-harm, and suicide. Another issue is the excessive use of pretrial custody and the use of jail for petty offenses, which can lead to an increase in the number of prisoners. The jail assists the prisoner in becoming aware of the offense they committed. There are also events inside the jail that help prisoners to overcome their daily struggles. The consequences of the imprisonment are not always bad.
One of the trends and issues in Philippine prisons are overcrowding. Some prisons have poor ventilation, limited food supply, unhygienic conditions, and inaccessible medical care. Mental health issues also arise due to isolation and lack of privacy. The reform of the jail and prison system is not really given attention to. There is no comprehensive reform program. The problem about jail conditions is not about lack of funds. It's the lack of priority and the lack of implementation of the law. The Bureau of the Jail Management also needs more facilities to reduce the congestion rate and eventually complied with the international standard. With this administration of our currently president, they had built more facilities to confine the prisoners, and also during this pandemic, they did a lot of things, and one of those are reducing the capacity of prisoners in prison and jail in order for them to handle carefully the prisoner without having a COVID-19 and making sure the countless detention facilities are equipped to take on the coronaviruses.
Crowding Rodrigo Duterte won the presidential election in 2016. He promised to end crime within 6 months. This promise also included the killings of thousands of criminals. Duterte's elections led to the infamous war on drugs and eventually overcrowded prisons. Manila City Jail, the largest jail in the Philippines, is split into dorms that safely house 170 inmates. Pretrial detention is found in the judicial system all over the world. In countries like the Philippines, people may serve time that outweighs their crimes. On average, prisoners in the Philippines are detained for 9 months without being sentenced. Overcrowding, poor living conditions, inmate violence, BP lacks nutritional food and basic health care. On account of these living conditions, the Mayo reports that at least one prisoner dies at BP each day. Thankfully, politicians and prison employees are working to reduce overcrowding in the Philippines prisons. Human rights advocates have also called for the release of vulnerable inmates, hoping to protect them from poor living conditions. The Philippines war on drugs has created the belief that extrajudicial violence and murder are necessary to fight crime. But the Human Rights Watch has turned the narrative around on Duterte. They are publishing information about the vigilante justice in the Philippines. Inmates who can afford a better life within the prisons are stuck in overcrowded and dirty rooms. These inmates have a higher rate of becoming ill of death. Now that the corruption has been unearthed, officials are taking steps to weed out one prison at a time.
Some trends and issues of jail and prisons in the Philippines. High death tolls. In New Bilibid prisons, about 5,200 inmates die annually. These deaths are due to overcrowding, dirty living conditions, and inmate violence. Overcrowding of jails and prisons has serious consequences for detainees. Access to safe water, sanitation, healthcare, and acceptable living conditions are a major problem in overcrowded detention facilities. Also, there is corruption. Inmates might live like kings for a charge, according to senators. Convicts were being bribed to bring and distribute contraband such as cigarettes, cell phones, and televisions. Personal cooks and nurses are said to be available to convicts. Inmates who cannot afford a better life within the prison are forced to live in smaller cells where they are more likely to become ill and die. However, politicians and prison employees are working to reduce overcrowding and corruption in the Philippine prisons. Human rights advocates have also called for the release of vulnerable inmates, hoping to protect them from poor living conditions.